Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizing committee of the 2019 and third Deep Learning Indaba, we would like to welcome you to Africa if you have not been here before. Kathleen would say to Kenya.
Yeah, welcome to Kenya. And just a bit about the Indaba. So the Deep Learning Indaba is an initiative to strengthen machine learning in Africa. And we do this through three main programs. There's the annual Deep Learning Indaba, which is how you're all here. There's the independently organized Indaba X's, and then we also have the Mathai and Kambule Awards. But just to get everything going today, we're going to start with the national anthem. So will you all please rise for the Kenyan national anthem? The words on the screen, so feel free to sing along. And it shall start soon.
Please be seated.
Before we proceed, we'd just like to give a big shout out to our sponsors and say a big thank you. This would not be possible without Kenyatta University, DeepMind, Google, Microsoft, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Department of Science and Technology of South Africa.
We'd also like to say thank you to Apple for their support, to Facebook, to Africa Stalking, to IBM,
to Salesforce, to InstaDeep, Visa, IDRC, CEDA, to Mars.
We also like to thank our advanced organizers, Expose, who's been unwavering to put this together, Amazon, Artificial Intelligence, Netflix, Carbon, Kaggle, Safaricom, Zindi, UCL, University College in London, Nearmap. Oh, and then finally, people in Oxford, the Oxford Africa Initiative is behind us, Black in AI, IntelliPro, Utu Maramoja, Cambridge University Press for donating prizes, MIT Press for donating prizes for the third year in a row, Knowledge for All has helped us put this together, and then finally Windsor and Safari Park have also helped us a lot with the opening and closing ceremonies. So it is now my great pleasure to invite someone to stage who is very familiar to all. He has been instrumental in the growth of the ICT sector in Kenya. He's an example of African leadership. So everyone, please welcome to the stage Professor Betangi Ndemu.
Welcome, Professor.
Good morning, Vice Chancellor. I was very comfortable thinking that a couple of speakers would speak before I speak, and now I am here. But I'm very happy to join you this morning because early 1990, it was like this when people stood up to to speak about the internet. And very few people believed what the young people then, I was among the young people that time, said that the world is going to change. We were used to postal services. Everybody was used to leaking stamps and sending letters. That has changed. And now as we embark on the fourth industrial revolution, we are talking about technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoTs and stuff. And not many people believe what people are saying. I'm saying this because we just finished a report on Kenya's roadmap towards these new technologies. I'm going to send it to Kathleen and maybe you will share because it's an open document. We need ideas. We need to work on it further so that we get a much stronger document. But what we are doing is that we're trying to create a policy environment that would enable you to work without interference. And because of that, we have created a couple of legal sandboxes where you would play before the regulators begin to understand. Although we are getting resistance from several places, I think because of this policy environment, we are going to see more and more people coming to Kenya because we have welcomed that we need to indeed get into the fourth industrial revolution because technologies like machine learning, AI, will democratize education, would help us understand our healthcare system, some of the solutions that we've seen, and to have regulators ahead of us would be the worst thing that would ever happen. I've worked in government, and one of my biggest problems were regulators telling you what to do, and I think they stand in between innovation and progress. And so basically we have approval that we can move that direction. We are seeing several applications that probably later on in this conference we can come and speak about what we're doing, what companies are doing in order to leverage these technologies. Personally, I am one of the members of the founders of World Data Lab, who have been using machine learning heavily with respect to understanding poverty across the world. And it's working. And we are seeing that we can use machine learning to understand whether human beings are progressing towards prosperity or not. I can't say more about AI's use in this country, especially in adaptive learning. I think those are some of the things you will get to understand. I'm very happy that Vice Chancellor, you allowed us to come here. Last year we were in South Africa, Stellenbosch, and I hope the universities begin to undertake these new technologies. I teach at the University of Nairobi, and the most difficult people to change our universities, because we are used to this semester, this number of classes, this what. I hope we can disrupt that environment by coming with new ways of learning and be able to improve humanity. Some of you who are not Kenyans, who are here, we welcome you so much, and we hope you stay. We don't chase away visitors. Some of you whom we find you are good, we can confiscate your passports so that we get capacity with respect to machine learning. Africa, in general, is the best place to be if you are working on technologies like this. I'm saying this because God has blessed this continent with so many problems that any of the problem you solve, you just make money. And it's a very powerful concept in entrepreneurship that problems are actually opportunities. And you can see those problems and opportunities at the same time. Our productivity in terms of agriculture is declining, and I'm 100% sure that these new technologies would help us deal with those problems. I am always fighting that we be allowed to solve some of these problems using technology. And seeing so many of you, especially around machine learning and AI, I'm the happiest person. I've been defending you without seeing your faces. Now I see some of your faces. And we welcome you to be here, to remain here. Karibu. Karibu means welcome. And you have a nice time. I would join you later again to discuss areas of opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Professor Ndemo, for the continued support as well. And now I have the honor of inviting on stage Professor Paul Wainaina, who is the Vice Chancellor of Kenyatta University, our gracious hosts. Can we welcome him with a round of applause? Sorry.
Thank you very much. Professor Ndemo, who is a former PS in Kenya government, and also a good professor and a friend of mine. Dr. Shakil Mohammed, who is the chairman of Board of Trustees, Deep Learning Indaba. Dr. Urich Patik, board member, Deep Learning Indaba. Members of university management who are here. The deans and directors of schools. Our distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to Kenyatta University, especially those among you who may be visiting our university and country for the first time. While you are here, you are our valued guests, and I'm sure you experience the warmth and friendship that Kenyans are renowned of. Actually, we are very warm, and I'm not just saying it. We are going to experience it after the 5 days or the days that we are going to be here. You realize Kenyans, we are happy people and very friendly. I also want to welcome you to this third Deep Learning Indaba. Hosting the third Deep Learning Indaba conference gives me great pleasure, noting that the first Deep Learning Indaba was held in Witwatersrand University, that is in Johannesburg in 2017, with about 300 participants, while the second one took place in Stellenbosch University in Cape Town, South Africa, with about 600 participants. Hosting the third Indaba with over 700 participants here in Kenyatta University is thus significant and a great honor to us. And actually, we don't take this for granted. I'm informed that participants have come from within as well as outside African continent. They come from a wide range of experiences, which includes undergraduate students, research students, lecturers, industry professionals, startups, and policy developers. On 16 March this year, 2019, Kenyatta University, being among other higher learning institutions in 27 African countries, taking part in the Indaba principles of spreading knowledge, growing communities, and championing diversity in artificial intelligence, hosted an Indaba X. We are indeed proud to join ranks of top universities in the development of artificial intelligence and machine learning. We have collaborations with IBM, UA, Oracle, and a few other organizations in the pursuit of related skills. At Kenyatta University, artificial intelligence and machine learning are taught in the Department of Computing and Information Technology in the School of Engineering Technology. You are all here for 1 week to teach, to learn, to debate, and strengthen the state of the art in the artificial intelligence and machine learning in Africa. Kenyatta University is proud to be partners with the Deep Learning Indaba and all of you in the mission. We began our plans to host this gathering 1 year ago, and I'm overjoyed to see the world's largest teaching event in artificial intelligence and machine learning being held here at Kenyatta University. Again, I want to say we do not take this for granted. Kenyatta University was founded in 1985 and is the third oldest public university in Kenya. Our institution is deeply committed to upholding the responsibility that comes with its rich history. As a public institution, KU has always been accessible to qualified persons who desire a good education. We provide our students from diverse local and international backgrounds and excellent facilities and high-quality programs that give them a head start in the world of work as highly skilled personnel and job creators. Being a dynamic institution, Kenyatta University engages with the community and is steadily elevating through research and knowledge application the quality of lives of people in our society. Kenyatta University is home to some of the world's best scholars, researchers, and experts in diverse fields. We pride ourselves in providing value-added courses and experiences that complement academic programs to produce individuals with the skills that are that are needed in the global market. Our commitment to supporting communities and advancing science and research is why we are so happy to host you in this Indaba. In Kenya, we are currently focused on achieving the Big Four agenda of affordable housing, universal health care, manufacturing, and food security. This means there are many opportunities for impacting the machine learning and artificial intelligence you will be learning to develop this week. Artificial intelligence is already having an impact in Kenya. For example, M-Shule, an SMS-based learning platform in Kenya, uses artificial intelligence to track and analyze student performance to deliver lessons that satisfy their needs and increase their competency. I'm sure that using the new skills you will gain this week, you develop new ideas to help us all make progress on the Big Four and other challenges. Advances in artificial intelligence areas will rely on your efforts to grow more, do more research, and think about how that research can be used responsibly within our communities. The Indaba at KU are in a relationship with the shared vision to strengthen this type of technical capacity, and we are committed not only to Kenya, but towards a greater Pan-African development. During this week, you will learn about many topics in deep learning. You will celebrate the winners of the Kabule and Mathai Awards. You will embrace the role of African women in machine learning. You will hear from the world's best thinkers and share your research and African largest artificial intelligence research symposium. You have an exciting week this week. I would like to end by thanking all the organizers and those who have worked very hard to bring the Indaba here. A special thank goes to the Indaba General Chairs, Catherine Simiu and Utrish Bouquet. More appreciation also goes to all the Kenyatta University organizing chairs, including Engineer Francis Ngokonyo, Professor Greg Bunyi, Dr. Harrison Joroge, Mr. Obadiah Otieno, Ms. Helen Mwihaki, and the others. And most importantly, thank you all for your attendance and devotion. I hope you enjoy your time here at Kenyatta University and the Indaba and learn as much as possible to find new ways to advance our sciences for a more prosperous Africa. Once again, thank you and welcome to the third Indaba, to Kenya, and to Kenyatta University. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wainaina. So we'll quickly just go through a couple of housekeeping rules before we invite our first keynote.
First of all, you all signed a code of conduct. So the Indaba is a very unique, inclusive community. Everyone's volunteering in some way or another to make this Indaba happen. Just want to remind you of the code of conduct that you signed.
I would also like to say again a big thank you to our sponsors and ask everyone to be very mindful of your belongings. Everything is safe, but just be mindful of your belongings. Don't leave your stuff lying around when you could take care of it better. Thank you to Safaricom who are giving us internet. So there's the Wi-Fi plus the password, Indaba 2019, password SAUTIE2.
Let people write it down first.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, please write down the Wi-Fi password.
Or take a picture.
Or take a picture. Part of the fourth industrial revolution. Okay. So in your programs, you would have a map of Kenyatta University. For those of you who have not seen it, we remind you to just turn to the back of your programs. If we zoom in a little bit, just before we zoom in, you'll see that very close to where we are the Eastern kitchens. It is that way. That is where dinner is going to be served every evening, and that is where breakfast is served for everyone who's staying in the hostels. This is roughly the layout of the Indaba for the week. So for those of you who've not yet been to the labs are all in that direction. There are 3 floors of labs that we'll use. On that side, you'll find the sponsor area and the chill zone where coffee and tea will be served, and lunch as well. Most importantly, for Friday night, the events buses that will take you to the closing party will be parked outside on that side.
So the parallel sessions are in the EBR, are in the education building, ground floor, first floor, and 4th floor. The practicals are in the computer lab, as Ulrich has said, all the floors. The hackathons are at SCC 2nd floor. Sorry, practicals, SCC intro ground at 1st. To be honest, I do not know what those things mean. In terms of bathrooms, we have some bathrooms at the back of the main hall. There's also additional toilets at the end of the chill park if you've walked around a bit. Breaks and lunch are going to be in the chill zone, so tea and lunch are going to be served here. And then dinner, as Ulrich mentioned, is going to be in the Eastern Kitchen, as well as breakfast for people staying at Nyayo. We have a couple of events happening in the evening outside of the official Indaba agenda. So there's a Women in Machine Learning event tonight. Sign up is at the Microsoft stand. So if you're interested in attending that, find them at the stand over there. On Tuesday night, we have an Innovation Grant Award ceremony under the AI4D initiative. There's a sign up on the agenda on the Indaba website. So if you're interested in attending that, feel free to sign up. There's an Apple mentorship event on Wednesday nights. Again, you can sign up at the Apple stand. Spots are limited. There's a Visa event on Thursday nights. Sign-ups at the Visa stand. Again, spots are limited. And finally, we'll have 2 Q&As, one with Andrew Ng and one with Fei Li on Wednesday and on Thursday. There's no sign-up required. That's going to be at the main hall, I believe. And there's an online form which you can put any questions if you'd like to have them addressed during that session.
Andrew and Feifei are not actually going to be at Indaba. They're going to Skype or video link in, but we're getting them for the next Indaba. So this is their warm-up. Yes.
So there's also a networking app which has been put together by InstaDeep. I think we should absolutely check it out. It has the program schedule, so you can track events as well as evening events. With networking, there's people suggested to meet depending on your profile, or you can find out based on what you're interested in. There's challenges only available to Android users. And then there's the web page. If you'd like more information about this application, see the website, which is coming soon. But for now, you can take a picture so that you can, remember the link. And finally, Sauti Yetu, which is our call to action for this Indaba, basically just means our voice. And I think this being the 3rd year of the Indaba happening and us just beginning to build a critical mass where machine learning and more generally AI is concerned on the continent, we thought that Sauti Yetu would be fitting because now with a critical mass, we can start to raise our voice and hopefully start to build and work on a shared vision. So feel free to go crazy on social media with the hashtag Sauti Yetu, take pictures, network, talk to people, and then tell the world about it.
After Aisha's talk, there will be lab sessions. There'll be 3 lab sessions that's going to happen. There's deep feed-forward networks, if you want an introduction to deep learning and deep feed-forward processing. The other one is a lab session that is about optimization specifically for machine learning and deep learning. And lastly, the 2 hackathon tracks are still running. There's a malaria hackathon track and there's an AI for conservation hackathon track. So you might realize that the Indaba is an ever-growing experiment, and we've introduced a couple of new elements in this year's Indaba. One is the hackathons that really show that we're a community with a big heart. The other one is a Francophone session, and the next big experiment in this Indaba is the African AI Festival that is going to happen on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, everyone who was involved in Indaba X would be on stage to present some research highlight from their country. So that's actually the thing I'm most looking forward to for this Indaba. If you happen to lose anything during this week, we are going to have a lost and found desk where the parallel sessions are going to be held, the parallel talks. So if you lose anything or if you want to ask any questions to anyone in the organizing committee, just go to the desk over there.
Okay, so finally, I have the great pleasure of inviting on stage our first keynote for the Indaba, Dr. Aisha Walcott-Bryant. Aisha is a research scientist and manager at IBM Research, and her keynote this morning is titled Innovations for Global Impact, My Journey as a Researcher in Africa. So, Aisha, welcome on stage. Maybe we can welcome her with a round of applause, guys. Aisha. Feel free to keep going as she makes her way to the stage.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh. Awesome. So, habari asubuhi. Oh, thank you. That's good morning. How's the news? How's everyone doing? Again, my name is Aisha. Today, I will talk to you about some projects that are very personal to me that we worked on together with incredible people just like you all in organizations here on the continent of Africa to address some of Africa's grand challenges. So a brief background, my journey. I was born and raised in Maryland in the United States. I went to undergrad in Atlanta, Georgia at Clark Atlanta University, and then I went to graduate school at MIT, and I earned a PhD in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab in robotics. I had always loved digital physical interaction, and so I guess I just learned later that to make a robot be autonomous, operate in this real world, you actually have to know some of the principles of AI. While in graduate school, I had the opportunity to work on some very incredible projects here on the continent. I had the opportunity to work in Ghana, first to teach at the University of Ghana in Legon. Anyone here from Ghana? Okay, hey. I had the opportunity, an amazing one, to deploy the very first Fab Lab on the continent of Africa, again, which was in Ghana, and so I was teaching digital fabrication. And then I also had the opportunity to bring basically IT education and IT curriculum to Meru. Anyone from Meru, which is in Kenya, near past Mount Kenya. I see a hand, there's one. All during my graduate experience. So I had a mix of Africa and a mix of robots, and that's why I'm here. After I graduated, I went to Spain to work around smarter cities. I worked a little bit in Madrid and mainly in Barcelona. And then actually my mentor changed a post on LinkedIn in which it said IBM Research Africa, and that was it. Based on my background, having been here, working on projects, I knew I needed to be here. So I joined the Nairobi lab here, which was the first established IBM Research Africa lab in 2013. I actually came slightly before it was open, that's how eager I was. So we were in a different location. And now we have a sister lab in Johannesburg. Many of my colleagues are from that lab, and they're here today. And now I want to turn to a bit of my story and why the work that we are all here doing today is important for not only my life, for your lives, and for the world. So over 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, about 5 months before I came to the continent, again for IBM, I gave birth to my daughter in Spain. It was a completely wonderful pregnancy, including the delivery, except there was one tricky part. In Barcelona, they speak Catalan, that's their local language, and then Castellano, that's Spanish that I was trying to learn, and I speak English, but learning Spanish. However, the experience was great. This is a picture of my daughter, actually at African Leadership University, where I haven't enrolled her in classes, where she was actually a judge, or a surprise judge, for the students who were building electronic toys. They were going to be judged by their teacher, Dr. Keno Omu, but instead I was able to bring my daughter there, and she really was able to judge their final projects. And then 1 year ago, a little over 1 year ago, I gave birth to my son right here in Kenya. Now, I never believed that the first picture of my son would be at an incubator. I never believed that I would see him tied, with leads on him, being monitored. I also never believed that a doctor would tell me, oh, you lost a lot of blood. We almost gave you a blood transfusion. But this is life, and this is what happened. So when I look at this picture, I think of a couple of things. First, I think about, what about the other women who come into this, who are giving birth in an emergency situation? Look at our context. It's completely different. About 2 weeks after my son was born, a friend of a friend gave birth to a baby boy. The mother died right here, again, in Nairobi. So I ended up nursing my son and expressing milk for a friend of a friend who I've never met for their son. This is just what we do. What else I see when I look at this picture, I see health systems. He's in an incubator, he's being monitored, health systems and the importance of health systems in Africa. One, coordination of care. For me, I went to maybe 4 or 5 different healthcare providers, facilities. I got tests, different antenatal care, sometimes duplicate tests. Also, I see my personal health and prevention. I actually had to think about malaria prevention as I was traveling around Kenya while pregnant, and that's something I didn't have to think about when I had my daughter. And finally, I think about access to care. You've seen maybe or experienced Nairobi's traffic, and you have to take a lot of trips during your pregnancy for antenatal care. And actually, when I was going to give birth, I planned, relatively speaking, to stay on the other side of town where the hospital was, where I was going to deliver, so that I can not risk Nairobi's unpredictable traffic. And imagine if I was stuck in traffic in my emergency situation. As it turns out, my son's heart rate had dropped to 60 beats per minute. Does anyone in the room know what a fetal heart rate should be? I didn't know. You can shout it. 180 is on the higher side, so between 110 and 180. So we weren't even close. Now imagine I'm in the middle of labor, you get this data and information, they actually had me listen to his heart rate go low, and then you gotta make a decision. You have to sign and consent. At the same time, my husband, who actually is really into IoT, wants to test whether or not the machine is working. I'm not kidding. Okay, and we're close. We're 7 centimeters, and things are not going well. So as it turns out, when I looked into it deeper, because I was trying to figure out if this was a completely normal pregnancy, in which it was, and everyone said everything was normal up to the morning of, why and what happened, and what happens to other women. It turns out detecting fetal heart rate is actually a difficult thing to do. You can see the leads on her stomach. It's able to detect the contractions and the heart rate of the baby, but discerning the heart rate of the baby from the mother can be a little bit tricky at times. You're also looking at graphs. If you're a healthcare provider in this setting, you're looking at graphs about how the contractions and the heart rate are going. Now, I think of it, or this situation, in 3 ways. First is everything is normal, the fetus is healthy, the mother is healthy, you're seeing all the data, everything looks good, and you have a healthy, normal delivery. Or it's dramatic and it's completely the other side, and you need to make an intervention immediately. But there is a large gray area. Now, you can imagine the range of healthcare professionals that help in delivery. We have traditional birth attendants. There's some women who deliver alone. And then there's some who are, OBGYNs. So that range of healthcare professionals needs to have the skills and the ability, and the ones that are alone, you can only imagine, to understand if things are not looking so well, what is the right intervention? So as it turns out, what they generally do is try to understand a little bit, and this is in that critical time window, they try to understand a little bit of the clinical history of the patient, the context, the resources available, the sets of interventions, and the data that are coming in. For me, this is a very clear place in which artificial intelligence can make a difference for decision support. So looking even further, I just was bothered. If women have been giving birth since the beginning of time, why are women still at high risk of dying during delivery? Every single person in this room came from a woman. We are more than 7 billion people on this planet. That is 7 billion samples, plus all the samples of those who have passed for us, for all you data-hungry, deep learning people. We have the data. It's happening every single day. 830 women die every day due to maternal complications. 99% of them are in developing countries. 14% are in Nigeria. 38% of women in Kenya actually are the ones that have access to a skilled birth attendant during delivery. So what about the majority? And I told you about making the critical decision. For me, again, an important area for AI. Well, what is AI? Artificial intelligence is learning and planning and reasoning and knowledge representation and interaction, and we leverage cool techniques like machine learning and neural nets and deep learning, and yeah, I know that neural nets are, and deep learning is related. And the evolution of AI, we are doing very well at building systems and machines on single domain tasks that are data hungry. We're starting to push the envelope towards broad AI, in which we're combining learning and reasoning on more multi-domain tasks, such as, let's say, question answering on videos. And then what's projected is that we're going to have general AI, in which your children, maybe even your children and children, all of us will contribute to. And this is more human-like capabilities, full autonomy, can switch to different domains and accomplish various tasks. And they also have cross-domain learning and reasoning projected way far out. But I would argue we should start working in cross-domain learning and reasoning now because of the complex problems that we need to solve on our continent. Good news, the future of AI is Africa. We are 1 billion people, we are more than 2,000 languages, and we are more than 3,000 diverse, rich, ethnic groups. The problems that we solve here are rich and complex, such that the innovations that we create can benefit the world. Who else will develop drug discovery algorithms that understand Africa's comorbidities? Who else understands the nexus of water and agriculture to strengthen food and security? Who else is going to build and create learning technologies to support students who code switch between their local language and their national language? So I truly believe that we have enormous potential to leverage AI and technology and to transform our continent, and actually we can lead on scientific breakthroughs. So now I'll highlight a few of the projects that I've worked on here. Again, these tie back to my personal reality and probably the personal reality of many of you, your friends, and your families. First is on enabling care coordination. Now, there's a baby in the audience. Where did that come from? On enabling care coordination. So we know, again, that Africa's health systems are considered to be under-resourced and strained. We focus traditionally on infectious diseases like TB, HIV, and malaria. However, there is a shift in the burden of disease towards non-communicable diseases like your hypertension, your diabetes, and your cancers. These diseases are different in that they require lifelong access to care. What does that mean for us if we have both a high infectious disease burden and soon to be a surpassing non-communicable disease burden? The truth is we must transform our health systems to be responsive and adaptive. So we did a baseline study here in Kenya where we visited a number of clinics, hospitals, and pharmacies to understand how hypertension was managed. And also we worked very closely with the health facility that was managing HIV patients. Some of the interesting things that we learned is the reality for a patient is that they go from facility to facility for different conditions for care. They visit their parents up country, they're there getting care. We also learned that because of that, there's very little continuity of care, fragmented systems. Actually, when we visited the facilities, many of them had electronic and paper-based systems. They were all completely separate, and you never got a holistic view of the patient. So we looked at the key challenges and where we think technology is appropriate. Really, first was health records management. Like I said, we have a lot of systems in place. The systems are generally based on disease, and therefore, I'm not my disease. I'm however, my health conditions can be. There can be more than one. And we looked at continuity and coordination of care because the reality is patients tend to self-refer and bypass. So the approach that we've taken is threefold. First, we worked really, really closely with a health facility in Western Kenya, understanding the systems in place. They're managing HIV, and actually they managed HIV so well that their HIV patients are living longer and getting hypertension and diabetes. And so they wanted to figure out how can they adapt their model for care to now manage both conditions. What we did is we leveraged blockchain technology to allow traceability and auditability and sharing of personal health data based on permission. So across different health facilities, they onboard into the network. You can add your personal health data, you can have clinical data, or even what's really relevant in our context, you have community health workers who are actually collecting probably more realistic health data about you in those communities. So this is a way to aggregate that and to share it. Second, we are focusing on care coordination, and care coordination is basically two things. First, it is around referrals, and second, it's around transitions of care, such as discharge. And what we wanted to do is we looked at the standard documentation, and it's just a set of fields from one of the hospitals here in Kenya. Our hypothesis is that just filling out those fields is not sufficient when you discharge a patient and they have to be managed back in their community, which could be 6-8 hours away. So we developed a tool using sequence-to-sequence modeling to read medical text and provide abstractive summaries that are able to augment such things like discharge summaries. And lastly, we are working on an algorithm that actually very efficiently explores the next exponential search space of subpopulations. So these populations are individuals that are defined with a set of features to find the most anomalous subpopulation in which a treatment that maybe there was no effect, but for this subpopulation, it turns out a treatment worked very well. And that's important given our rich and diverse context. So I'll briefly go over a few of these. Again, we created this platform. We work with this hospital. We actually have tested it in this setting, both the user side, because you have to think people have to use your technology, as well as how do you deploy a blockchain system in Africa. So doing a lot of system measurements and testing there. And then from this, we started to think through how are we going to summarize different health notes on a patient for transitions of care. So this is an example of a referral hospital. You go to the referral hospital, and then you're potentially given your discharge summary, and then you go back to your community. Maybe you drive back 6 hours away. Does the patient have enough information to give to the provider back in the community? So briefly, this is your kind of standard sequence-to-sequence abstractive summarization pipeline. The reason we chose the abstractive is we wanted to create summaries that would seem like they're human readable. And what we did is we started with a data set, clinicaltrials.gov. You guys, I think it's open to everyone. And those have long, complex clinical trials, and it has abstracts of them. So the goal is to be able to generate summaries that look as much like the abstracts. We made a shorter version just to test the concept, and this is just an example here. And we used our metrics like rogue metrics that are standard metrics to use for evaluating this work. However, even when I was understanding the rogue metrics that are coming from this work, there was no way that I'm going to believe your rogue metrics over a provider. We have to balance both. So the next step for this work is to be able to evaluate it with healthcare professionals. Overall, for this project, what we're doing is twofold. First is actually testing with real healthcare professionals, from community health workers, nurses, admins, and clinicians and clinical officers. Some of those are not common in all contexts. So we actually have a pilot that's running here in Kenya. And we're also setting a study to understand how providers, the information they need when they do transitions of care or for care coordination. And then on the more technical side is to really look at different sources of health data on the individual and to summarize that in a way that can augment the information that would go to a provider to provider. And lastly is the work around the anomalous patterns of care detection. So now, as I spoke in the beginning, things that I had to consider when I was pregnant here versus in Spain was around malaria prevention. And this project is very interesting because it was a student from Oxford University who sent an email who said, I want an internship at your lab. And when we started to have conversations, what was really bothering this individual is that he was doing AI, building algorithms, reinforcement learning, and then putting them into Atari games. Why can't you do that and put it into environments or simulations that are actually going to make a difference potentially in people's lives? That's what got me hooked from the beginning, and now that project has blossomed into what is the malaria challenge being hosted right here with IBM and Zindi. So in this work, believe it or not, it's startling facts. Every 30 seconds, a child dies from malaria somewhere worldwide. I just can't believe it. 90% of the malaria cases are right here in sub-Saharan Africa. And in 2020, every country will miss their targets. So what are we going to do? How can we as the AI community start to address this problem? Let's look at it in a couple ways. First, the decision maker, the policy maker, the one that needs to make up the plans, the strategies for malaria eradication or reduction in prevalence within their region or country. They have a number of choices, from treatment protocols to spraying, how much of the population, larviciding, net distributions, how many people should get nets? Should it be 90%? Should it be 91%? What is the optimal plan? It's a complex space of actions. At the same time, the disease modeling communities have very rich models about not only malaria, but many other diseases. However, these models can be inaccessible to a policymaker. So how can we start to engage and close the loop between these two from a technical AI perspective and from a human-computer interaction perspective? First, what we did is decision makers are looking through this action space, and this is just an example of spraying in nets, and it's using an area within Kenya that has been modeled already. And what we want to do is be able to first basically explore this space that the model provides. And usually it's computationally very expensive, so you want to have a very smart guided strategy. So here we were using multi-arm bandits, and we're able to do inference on that space, like through Gaussian process regression. Some of you will learn more about it this week. And we were able to get a much richer landscape than the current intervention which was there. It's not to say that our solution is the optimal solution, but it's to say that we've created a much richer space in order to look for the optimal, let's say it's cost-effective solution. So that's at the one snapshot slice level. The truth is, this is a problem for policymakers to make over time. They make their 1-year strategy, and then 2 years ahead, then maybe 5 years ahead, out to 10 years ahead. And we have stochasticity in the models and uncertain futures and outcomes, right? Now, if you have an uncertain outcome in this space, trying to ground truth it is actually very complicated. How are you going to measure that you got rid of all the mosquitoes? How are you going to know across all your health facilities that maybe very few patients were contracted malaria? It's a hard thing to measure. It takes time. So we can leverage some sequential decision-making techniques like reinforcement learning, and we can start to help policymakers to make what is the best choice over time. Again, the future is uncertain. So how do we leverage these rich, complex models in the best way based on the models that are out there? We need to be able to combine them to hopefully reduce uncertainty in what the potential target is for the policymaker. And that's where our team is headed next. The beauty of this work, it is a wonderful example that by bringing together disease modeling and innovations in artificial intelligence, we can, in silico, eradicate malaria and other diseases worldwide. That's powerful. You all can actually do this. The last project I worked on was around improving mobility. And this was around, for me personally, access to care. So Nairobi is notorious for their traffic conditions. Broadly, most low, middle-income developing countries have an 80% increase in traffic fatalities. Nairobi is the second most congested city in the world. It moves up and down, but not too much. And lastly, Nairobi tends to lose approximately $1 million a day in wasted productivity, fuel, and so forth due to its traffic congestion. So this was a new domain. This is when I just joined the lab for me, but we posed a research question. And we wanted to understand what are the infrastructural and behavioral variables that cause traffic problems in developing cities. So first, we want to start with data, right? So in the West, you usually have your traffic cameras, your loop detectors on the roadways, and these are very data-intensive networks to give you some traffic analytics. However, at the time of this work, that infrastructure did not exist on an ongoing basis. So what we started to do is say, well, what can we use in the environment that'll help us to start to leverage what we have here? We can use mobile phones. We literally went down to the mobile phone shop and bought smartphones. Why? Because they have inertial sensors in them. At the same time, we were talking with Nairobi City County, who also wanted to address their traffic problems. And specifically, the head of environment said that they had just gotten a new fleet of garbage trucks, And if we give them some analytics to help support managing their fleet, they would allow us to install these adapted smartphones into their trucks. So we install the smartphones into the trucks. Key elements are accelerometer, so you're kind of feeling the bumpiness of the roadways, and gyroscope, so maybe you can start to get some behavior around the driver. And what I'll do is I'll show you a video that will highlight this work, and then we'll come back to it. I don't know how to, I don't know how to hit play, or I can skip it. Oh, he hit it for us. Okay. It's definitely an underlying thing that's in most cities. Traffic in Nairobi is highly unpredictable. There's vehicles that are competing for space. You have many different modes of transport. There's so many things that happen in the roadways, and it makes Nairobi unique, challenging, but also charming. As more and more people move in to Nairobi to get access to jobs and be a part of the economic growth, then those roadways struggle. It's a city that's resource constrained, and it's rapidly urbanizing. So we have to be innovative here, and those innovative solutions will apply to most of the developing world. This started with a simple walk in a community of Nairobi. We ran into the head of environment for Nairobi City County. He said, "Can you help me with my trucks?" We came up with a plan there. We built the solution. From there, we started to build our models to study the data further. Urban infrastructure is the key element that allows people to get around the city in whichever way they choose. So when that doesn't work, people have to think about, how am I going to get to where I need to go, given that now there's a sudden traffic jam? Or how can I be sure that my kid is safe when they're riding on a boda, for example, with poor road quality at the same time? If you're running a small business, you're not sure if what it is you're selling is going to arrive in time in order for you to supply that to your customers. Long commutes, for me personally, I was a nursing mother, and she needed her mom. So I needed to get back to my daughter. I think people were definitely surprised by the solution. They didn't realize that you could use an adapted smartphone to know about the road quality. We leveraged the sensor suite on these mobile phones. We've installed them into vehicles to adapt them in a way that we can now understand urban infrastructure.
You know, I have never thought of counting potholes in Nairobi.
Most of the solutions that you will find to help you understand your infrastructure is very costly and will not work for developing cities. So that's really how this project came about.
With the production scale of mobile phones, we're able to get all these sensors and all this functionality at a relatively cheap price.
We've got the IBM Internet of Things connecting all these devices together. From that, we're able to generate insights that tell us a lot about the roads.
This is not just a vision, we're actually implementing this. We are working with Nairobi City County. We have installed in a quarter of their waste collection vehicles. We've generated models to understand the road quality. These solutions here could potentially be more cost-effective for some of the big cities. Now you're able to address the traffic problem globally. The data can definitely do more than we originally thought. This data can be leveraged by other businesses because there's so much entrepreneurial energy and there's a huge tech spirit here, and this data might be part of something bigger. It's important to give people their free time. For them, that's their opportunity to be themselves, to pursue the things that they want to do. So free time is everything to being an individual. Thank you. I think some of you have seen some similar situations wherever you are from in terms of the richness of the roadways. So you've heard the phrase context matters, and we really embodied that in this work. We modeled road quality, we built a simulator to detect moving obstacles, and then you all here in Nairobi know that when it rains, everyone's quickly trying to get out of the door to get home because of potential flooding, and you can stay in traffic for maybe 16 hours or more. This has happened. Time of day or time in general matters. When it's payday at the end of the month here, there's more cars on the road, people got paid, they get to fuel their vehicle. That's just the truth. So these are very nuanced contextual variables that we need to be able to model when we're thinking about traffic solutions. I'll highlight a little bit of the techniques, the machine learning techniques that we use. For road quality, we had to build like a labeling app and then the sensor collection app. And we did a couple of things. We tried it with our own vehicles, did some labeling of potholes, speed bumps. Every time a speed bump came, we wanted to have the time window, so we'd say speed bump, and we'd all do it together and go over, and then we label at the end of it. But that's just what we needed to do to make this happen. For working with the trucks, we didn't have as much access to the trucks because they're doing their job. And we're able to actually detect road quality pretty well around the city. This is an example map of Kamkunji sub-county, which is here in Nairobi. And at that time, the roads were quite rough. We showed this back to the stakeholder, and then he was able to start to think about many of the vehicles that were on that route were actually under maintenance. So potentially this could be a reason why. So again, this is using time series data, windowing the data, applying your machine learning techniques. We did a couple of different models, SVMs, logistic regression, random forest, to start to get the right set of results that were good enough for the work that we were doing. The next, moving traffic obstacles. So you all saw that the cattle, so Maasai will herd their cattle across the roadways, and we all just wait, and that's just the way it is. And how many of you know that on Langata Road, which is one of the main roadways, at about 7:45 a.m., the baboon families will cross from one side of the park to where the cemetery is. I know it well because I run and I'm a little scared in those situations. But these are realities of our roadways. So we didn't have samples of several probe vehicles in order to actually truly detect out there these types of moving traffic obstacles. So what we did is we observed the depot where the vehicles were, and you can see for a small portion the vehicles actually follow each other on a road that's pretty vibrant and alive. So there are push carts, there's a lot of people moving around. So we made observations around whether or not a vehicle maneuvered. Now, a vehicle can maneuver for three reasons. I am a vehicle, one, and there might be others behind me. I'm swerving, maybe because I'm not that great of a driver. Or I'm swerving because there's a traffic obstacle. Now, what type of traffic obstacle? Is it a moving one, or is it like a stationary one, like a pothole? Well, you can use a time-space diagram, right, to start to determine whether or not you see lines, assuming constant velocity, that represent slow-moving obstacles. And this is what we did to inform a simulator. In this simulator, we basically simulate moving traffic obstacles at slow speeds and vehicles, which you see in blue, in the higher speeds, and they're basically detecting the probability of the event as to whether or not an obstacle is there or not. Then we want to look for lines. But because there's probability, we need to be able to think about, it'll be blurry around the lines. So we use an edge detection technique, which was cool because we had someone from transportation science and computer vision in there. And with the edge detection technique, like the probabilistic Huff transform, you are able to start to see lines of these moving traffic obstacles using this simulator. Then we just varied the number of moving traffic obstacles for a certain amount of time and length of road, as well as the number of probe vehicles, which is your trucks. And we measured, the F-scores over time. And so this is an interesting way to start to think about the problem of detecting these events. Lastly, context matters. We wanted to model the roadway. So let's assume that we can now model road quality within a road segment, and we can also detect when there's how dynamic that road segment is, if there's a lot of push carts on there, a lot of cattle herding on there. But now we want to know, how does this affect the way that drivers drive. So what we did is now we have a labeled set of road segments along the road network of all of Nairobi. We started to look at the driver behavior along these road segments and in different contexts. So those are just proportion graphs in the context. And we thought about usage-based insurance, of which we read about from, I think it's out of South Africa, one of the insurance there, maybe it's Progressive, was using usage-based insurance that basically detects driver behavior. So if they harsh brake, all of these different events. And we said, wait, if I harsh brake here, it's usually for a reason. Or if I swerve, it's usually because I'm avoiding something. So we've created a framework or a context-based driver score in which we discount based on the behavior of all the other drivers on this road segment in these different contexts. And so now we can use that score to say, okay, I swerved at a pothole, and turns out everyone else swerved at the pothole, so I'm not going to be affected in the same way. So this was a very beautiful, hard piece of work to start with when you first join a lab. I spent most of the time at the dump, or at the depot. The trucks leave at 6:30 a.m., which means you're leaving your house at 5:15. If you leave at 5:20, you might be stuck in traffic for 2 hours, and you'll miss the window. We're understanding all of their workflows and their complexities. At the same time, always keeping an eye on research, on where AI is appropriate and where technology is appropriate. So I discussed 3 projects that are personal to me, my life, and make me reflect on giving birth here in Kenya. This is an example of kind of how we've been approaching many of the problems. We're generally very technical, just like everyone else here in the room. So when we move into a domain, you bring your techniques with you, but keep a complete open eye and listen. None of these problems I could have ever made up. I do it by working with the organizations and just listening. It's so nuanced. That's critical. Things like design thinking, doing these workshops in hospitals is some of the work that we've done. We also give technical talks, do technical exchange, just like this. Academic partnerships, just like when we had the intern from Oxford, now we have a collaboration because of that work. And some other projects that we're working on are, first, water. This week is World Water Week. Does everyone know that? Now you do. And I happen to manage the project that is developing technology. Actually, we've deployed it in the 5 northern counties of Kenya, in Wajir, Garissa, Isiolo, Marsabit, and Turkana. And we're helping the counties to make decisions around water service delivery. So what happens at a pump in a borehole? There's sensors on them. How do we detect when they're broken? Giving more real-time, up-to-date monitoring of a huge part of the country. I think it's over 75%. And it's semi-arid and arid area, so water is absolutely critical to the lives there. We have work in agriculture, financial services, education, government transformation, and just what we call core AI sciences, in which we say this is AI from Africa for everyone. And we're doing work there around anomalous patterns, pattern detection. These are some of the folks from our lab who are working on those projects that are here at Indaba, and we'll give a few different talks. But before I go, I want to pose a few open questions to you all. First is really thinking about language. So how do we develop cross-lingual language understanding in order to provide technologies that are appropriate across geographies? I know many of you all have thought about this, are probably working on this. So can we be strategic about how do we address this? Again, we're more than 2,000 languages. How can we use deep learning to understand the evolution of genotypic and phenotypic response to disease patterns in Africa? And there isn't a lot of data from Africa when it comes to genome sequencing. And we need to be able to start to enable that and build trust around that as well. And how can we develop distributed smallholder farming models? Because that's the way we farm here, not with the large-scale farms. And to improve food security given climate change. So you might have to change your crop mix, so forth. But most importantly, remember I said that general AI is coming in 2050 and we're all going to be part of it, and our children and our children's children will be a part of it. Well, guess what else is coming in 2050? 2 billion Africans. So how will AI help the 2 billion Africans in 2020? Remember, the future of AI is Africa. We are 1 billion people, more than 2,000 languages, more than 3,000 rich, diverse ethnic groups. The innovations that we create here will be, based on our context, will be used and leveraged to benefit all of the world. People will look to Africa for answers. Thank you.
Some time for questions, so Kathleen and I are going to walk around with roaming mics. If you do have a question, just raise your hand and we'll come with you with the microphone.
Okay, so I'm Solomon. I'm from Ames, Cape Town. Yeah. So you say that you stopped the project on the one on traffic. Yeah. May I know why it was looking like a fad project?
I get that question a lot. So in general, our role as research is really to test ideas and kind of push the limits. Some things work, some things don't work. The truth is the solution is more than just technology. It requires policy as well, behavior change as well. So if all those things don't align perfectly, we can't exactly do everything at that time. So it's not necessarily that it stops, it's that those other things need to be in place for this to roll out. Good question. Any other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
First, thank you. That was really nice. My question is, what do you think is the best way for individuals to contribute given resource constraints in data collection and hardware and compute?
To contribute from an AI perspective or just addressing? Okay. So the data problem. Oh, everybody talks about it. Yeah. And I'm still thinking as to whether or not we truly have a data problem. There can be maybe a space where there's no data at all. I just doubt it. But maybe it's the case that the data that we do have, we need to look at it differently. So I have a great colleague, Skylar, who's here today, who was developing credit models on mobile phone-based data a few years ago. So that's not something that came, where you're looking for traditional banking models from the West. We have people here on the continent, actually more than 60%, that don't have a traditional bank account. So how else will you know whether or not they will pay back a loan? Let's think about alternative data sources that will potentially get you towards your question. And that's what I mean by thinking across domain. Yeah, so it's tricky, but I think there are enough data to bootstrap and get us started. If we can also start to use expert knowledge, there are experts on the continent, we can start to build systems that way. It doesn't just have to be throw your giant data set to a model with an outcome. Hi.
Thank you very much, Santi. My name is Bayo. I'm from Nigeria. And I look at all the issues you raised, and I think we have like 10x your problems. When I saw the traffic condition, I'm wondering, I'm sure it was in Lagos. But anyway, so my question really is, I like what you're doing, the fact that you're trying to solve the problem from the community. Are there efforts to actually try to look at other communities? Because our problems, the factors may not really be the same It may not be cows crossing the road in Lagos. It might be something else. So what are you doing in those areas? Or are you like a bicycle approach where you have a spoke? Are you doing everything from Kenya and pushing across, or you're building up some things in those places? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. So the answer is we can't do it alone. We have awesome, and this is me personally speaking, I think it's awesome that other organizations and businesses like Microsoft and Google are here and committed on the continent as well. We have to do it with an ecosystem of partners who are across the continent, who are all looking at the community. And we have to think about, if I develop something, and there are similarities, right? We may need to do some algorithms to understand the similarities, but if I develop a solution here, always keep my eye on Legos, right? What knobs do I even need? And then how do I need to turn them to adapt the solution? So that's the challenge for us, because we are so many nations on the continent and so many different contexts. But I think we approach the problems by knowing that what we do here is not necessarily for everywhere, so we have to keep an eye out. So we still engage with communities across the continent, and hopefully, more partners. Yeah, good question.
Hi, Aisha.
Hi.
My name is Mbithe, and I'm from Kenya.
Okay.
And I saw that you have a background in robotics, which is interesting for me because I am currently working with cognitive robotics and human-robot interaction.
Awesome.
And my question for you is, do you plan to work on robotics in the future or currently? And do you see a way that robotics can be used for impact for the kind of life-changing projects that you're working on now? Do you see robotics doing that in Africa in the near future?
Great question. I think about it every day. I love robotics. It's just a normal thing for me. The human side, I'm getting used to, you guys. So yes, it's already making a difference. There are examples, especially from the aerial robotics domain, where there's some companies that are looking at agriculture, understanding the state of the farm by flying drones. There's drug delivery also potentially with drones. I think there'll be an element of mechanization that'll come in the future. And we have some robot experts in the room. I see one there. Yeah, that will hopefully tell us more. But I actually think it's not necessarily, let's look at challenging problems and think about the ways in which that we can address them. That's how I've approached my work here, is to take the techniques that I've learned within robotics and see how they apply. And it's not that robotics won't be a part of the solution. I do see it coming in the future. There's a lot of ways to do automation. And thinking about, we have another colleague who's building a robot arm from CMU Rwanda, and he wants to be able to speak to the arm. But he wants to speak code switch with Nigerian and say, give me that kini over there. Right? So how do we do that language interaction with these types of systems? So I think it's here. If we broaden our community, then we will be stronger in terms of starting to address our problems using robotics. And sign me up whenever. Okay. Hi.
Hi. So I'm May from Egypt, and I'm going to go back to the data issue, especially in the healthcare. So you're doing an amazing job already. I think that what you described is basically something of interest in different areas in the world right now. But there's also the data issue when it comes to like coming with abstracts from the doctor notes or coming up with accurate predictions that is evidence-based, and especially when you're talking about different ethnicities. So a lot of the data is already available, is not from Africa as an open source data. So this is a big problem for me. Like even in Egypt, when you try to come up with a good data from hospitals, it's really hard and there's a lot of legal issues. Yes. So do you think that there might be a chance for researchers from all over the continent could kind of somehow unify the data they already have and make it kind of open source while maintaining the privacy? And also there's also an affiliation problem that you need to be affiliated with something. And yeah, for a young researcher who wants to get into the field, how can I do this if I don't have access to data that doesn't make my model biased?
Okay, so really good question, and I guess if I had known more about how complicated healthcare was, maybe I would have been shy, but I just sort of went in naively and I just like, we're gonna build everything. And then all of these challenges come. So a couple of things. The truth is, when there aren't data, we've been using open available data sets like Mimic to start to even test if some of our ideas make sense from a technical perspective. And then through our pilots on the ground, we're getting small data, and we can use it either to ground truth or even provide knowledge back into that model and how to adapt it. Now, healthcare is complicated. I showed one story of the tech. If I tell you about writing the IRB and getting that done, it is like a second life, right? It's quite a bit of work to design a study and to recruit patients and to find the hospitals that are willing to participate. So there are studies, though, and from studies, data arrive. There are some places like the Gates Foundation has a platform called KI, Knowledge Integrator, in which they are finding these studies and the PIs in order to bring their data back into the platform. So what I didn't know about all of these things. So there actually are data. People have been researching the continent for a long time. Those are all studies. Generally, they've been an IRB-approved study. So the challenge is more on how do you engage back with those PIs to potentially provide a way to have access and to attribute them for the work that they've done. It's not as simple as us just sharing data because it's sensitive personal information. So I think it causes us to innovate, which is a great thing. So bootstrapping maybe existing data sets that are out there, run a pilot, use that as small data, see what you've learned. Maybe you're completely off. If you're completely off, still publish the results because knowing what didn't work is super important to the scientific community. Hopefully that helps.
Hello. Thank you, Aisha, for the nice talk. And I'm Abdurrahman. So I've seen that almost everyone was talking about the lack of data issue. But you know, when you talked about the student from not Stanford, Oxford, yeah,
Oxford, yeah,
who was doing machine learning for Atari games instead of solving actual problems, it like posed that question in my head. Most, maybe not most, but so many of African machine learning researchers and practitioners are not in Africa, actually. We're like all over the world. And it's not just us, it's like everyone else. Maybe most of us, or maybe lots of us, don't really relate to the problems, to the daily problems in the African communities. So one question is, what are even the problems that we can work on, that we can solve? And then even if we know, okay, we can solve the malaria problem or this or that problem, we don't have the field knowledge, we don't have, you know, the big picture to look at. We don't even know how to approach that problem. So maybe if we can have some sort of a website or a blog or, you know, some sort of an entity where people can share the researches they're working on, so people can be encouraged to know more about the problems, to how to approach them, and then we can be really encouraged to solve real problems instead of Atari games. Thank you.
Yeah, so I won't tell you what the problems are. My problems might not be the same as yours, but I do think that you must do it in collaboration. There's no way. We've never sat in the lab for any problem. Most of the problems that we have an idea, yeah, we're going to apply this algorithm that does X, and everyone's excited, and then we just listen to the domain experts, and we're not doing that. But we can chart a roadmap that will get there, potentially, but usually they have more pressing problems to solve immediately. So that's a good example of that actually was the sort of care management platform that allowed for the sharing and exchange using patient consent. And so they're like, oh, okay, great, now we can actually see the data across the different health facilities. Then, once you've done that, you can sort of get trust and buy-in when we're working with these entities to start to show what could come next. I think number one, you're here, don't work alone. we don't know everything about malaria at all. I don't think anyone thought we did, but we just knew that we know how to search complex search spaces, and malaria is a type of problem that can be formulated in that way in which we can apply. But you must work with partners. Hi, Naima. Okay.
Good afternoon. Oh, someone there. Okay, sorry. Good morning. My name is Bridget from Nigeria.
Hi.
For a very long time now, in the African continent, one of the major challenges that we've been having is the issue of terrorism, the issue of insecurity. I don't think there's any African country that has not witnessed one form of terrorism or the other. So presently, I'm working on how I can apply AI into curbing terrorism in Africa. And there seems to be very scarce literature in that aspect. I am thinking perhaps you would have come across, or you're doing something related to how you can apply AI to curbing terrorism, perhaps the areas precisely you can look into. Thank you.
So we don't have a project in terrorism per se. It's pretty, that's, there's a large political factor there. So thinking about, what's the role of technology and what's the greatest value of technology in something that's that complex and very human is an open challenge. But you're right, we have conflicts. There's even conflicts between communities here in Kenya. We have a water project that's in the northern counties of Kenya. It's also known to be an area where there has been some difficulties between the communities. So you have to be sensitive to that when you're making, let's say, a recommendation algorithm that says you should do this set of strategies. How do you encode those contextual factors that these two communities might not get along well in such problems? It's a difficult problem. I would argue, as I said back there, for that I would work with mainly the domain experts that understand those types of problems. It's something that I don't want to sort of technologize, and I don't have that answer. But I think it's great that you brought it up. Yeah, and maybe we can discuss. Hi, yeah. Thank you.
Touching on healthcare, food security, and mobility. These are areas that concern us very, very, very much. And the area of mobility, we have had trouble with this issue for many, many years. And we thought we were just getting into the solution, firstly by getting an elevated corridor from the airport to Wayakiwe, and getting the bypasses around, developing parking lots in the city. I think we have a project to do an 11-floor parking in the city. I don't know how you have taken care of this in your model.
I did not pass that project.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. So mobility, we've tried many different things. Okay. The original thing with the work that we did is that we actually thought we would be leveraging a solution from our Tokyo research lab. Streets of Tokyo, not the same as the streets of Nairobi. And because of that, it allowed us to really look at the differences between those types of solutions and what we need to understand here. So the idea was that if we can model these elements and use those back into your traffic simulator models, then your models that policymakers might use in order for transportation planning could be more relevant to your context. I'm not sure what is being used now, but I'm not sure if they capture the dynamics such as push carts, herding, and so forth in them. Yeah. And I just want to state that who worked on the mobility project was a Kenyatta University graduate, John Mbari, who's now also at pursuing a PhD at UMass Amherst. So it's great that Kenyatta University is bringing great students, and we look forward to continue working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha, everyone give a big hand to Aisha. Thank you so much for supporting us and being here. We're now going to take a coffee and tea break, and in 35 minutes we're going to reconvene for the next parallel track. So coffee and tea will be served outside. 35 minutes later, we expect you to be seated for the next round. Thank you so much.
And just really quickly, as we break, everyone who hasn't registered, please head to the EBR building, which is on the other side of the picket fence on the left. That's where registration is happening today.